What's up, guys? So I wanted to start sort of a how-to series on how to project. Since I've started this channel, I've gotten a lot of emails from people, and a lot of the questions in those emails revolve around, I've made it this far, now what? Or I'm feeling this sensation, what does that mean? Or, I don't know what to do at all, so how do I start? And so I thought, it's a good a time as any to talk about it, right? So I will give you a warning up front that this is a massive topic. There's a whole lot to talk about, and it's going to be split into at least 3 videos and possibly more, just depending on how far these run or how long these run. Because what I don't want is for these to be like 2 hour long episodes where, they're too long and they're not useful to anybody. So that being said, I actually want to err on the side of providing too much information rather than not enough, though, because as I was learning this process, I would go to YouTube, and there's nothing more frustrating than coming across like a 3 minute video that says, here's 3 easy steps to project tonight. And it's completely useless, right? It's useless to everybody because it's not that easy, and it takes more than 3 minutes to learn this. It takes weeks or months. Well, so maybe I'm a slow learner. It took me months. It's a hard thing to do, and if evidence of that is because you're here watching this video and we don't all know how to project and we can't all do this every night. So I really want to err on the side of providing more than enough information. But if there's anything that I leave out, anything that's still unclear when I'm done, please ask questions, and I'd be happy to address that kind of stuff in subsequent videos. All right, so there are probably hundreds of projection techniques. And in my research, these can all be placed into one of probably 3 different categories. And the category I'm going to talk about today is one that a guy named Michael Raduga, he is a Russian author. He wrote the book The Phase, what he calls the direct techniques. Now, I'm going to start with the direct techniques, not because they're the easiest, because they're not, but because they're probably the most commonly talked about and most well known. And for those of you who have done other research on this, you'll probably be familiar with these ideas already. So I just wanted to start with this and probably expound on these kinds of things and hopefully provide information you haven't found elsewhere. So the idea with the direct techniques is that there is no lapse in consciousness between awake and your projection. So you're awake, you put yourself into a state where you can project, and there's this transition, and then you're out of body, you're in the phase, you're in this projection, and no lapse in consciousness in the middle. Now that is not an easy thing to do. There's 2 primary methods for doing this, the first of which I have never accomplished, and that is through meditation. Now, personally, I love meditation, and I think it's highly beneficial to multiple aspects of life. It's beneficial to learning this process as well because it teaches you how to, focus your thoughts and clear your mind and relax your body and all these things. I've never projected from the lotus position in a meditative type posture, though. That's something I haven't been able to do. But I'm going to talk about the opposite side of this, which is the mind awake, body asleep state when you're lying in bed. And this is something I do either in the middle of the night or before I go to bed in the evening. And that is something I've got experience with, so I can walk you through that entire process. So that is a hard thing to learn. And why? Is because that is not something that we naturally do. So myself, I've got 30 plus years of letting my mind fall asleep first. That's just the way it works. We lay down, we go to sleep, the mind falls asleep, the body follows. We do that our entire lives, and that's not an easy cycle or an easy habit to break. So what I'm going to do is I'll talk about the things that I still do today, things that I would not be able to do this without. And then I will also talk about some experiments that I used along the way to try to train my mind into staying awake while my body falls asleep. And I can't actually pinpoint any of those that really, and I can guarantee worked, but I'll mention the ones that I tried, and that way you've got a few different options, because I got to the point where I could do it, but I tried a few different things, and I can't say exactly which one, was the silver bullet, which one was the magic trick that actually made this thing work. So I'll cover them all. All right, so the first piece that's important is to lay down in a position that you don't normally sleep in. Now, for me, I mentioned I'm a side sleeper, so I lay on my back. And the thought behind that is if you lay in a position that you naturally sleep in, if you're a normal, non insomniac, if you don't have insomnia, you don't suffer from insomnia, you'll tend to fall asleep very quickly if you are in a position that you tend to sleep in all the time. So I lay on my back to slow down that falling asleep process and give me a little bit more control. But then that introduces some additional challenges. So one of those is swallowing, and it's important to not move through this process. And that includes more obvious things like scratching an itch, like rolling over, but it also extends to things as small as swallowing. That swallowing reflex, you could be laying in bed, you can manage not to swallow for 20 minutes, you can be making great progress, you swallow, and your body says, the mind is still awake, and your body will wake back up, and it'll ruin the state. The goal is to trick your body into falling asleep first. Um, and so what I do to counteract that swallowing reflex is I actually place a couple of pillows behind my head and I push my head up, you know, almost to the point where I'm looking down at my toes. And it's not incredibly comfortable. It's not incredibly uncomfortable, but I think that the discomfort actually probably helps because it helps slow down that falling asleep process, I think. And it also causes the spit in my mouth to pool more on the bottom of my mouth than in the back of my throat and prevents that reflex from triggering. So that is something that took me a little while to get over. That's a hard thing to do. So I would recommend propping your head up. Give that a try, especially if you're sleeping on your back. If you're sleeping on your side, maybe swallowing is not as big of a deal. I'm not sure. I usually fall asleep so quickly that I don't even know. Um, all right, so movement. So the next thing I do, and this is probably even less obvious, is eye movements. Underneath my closed eyelids tend to affect the process. And so if you've ever tried to just hold your eyes still, so close your eyes, just look straight forward and just stare at one spot. Now just stare at that one spot for a minute and then maybe try for 5 minutes and try not to move your eyes at all. And if you're like me, what you'll find is that your eyes start doing these little twitchy type movements and looking around to see what's going on. And it's probably just a natural thing. That's probably what they're doing during the day, looking around and seeing what's going on. So this may not be required, but I found that my body will fall asleep a whole lot more quickly if I can hold my eyes still. So what I do is I let them roll back into my head, kind of pointed to the center of my forehead, so I've got one set point of focus, one specific place that I look every time. And that rolling back in my head seems to be sort of a natural position for sleep. And so my eyes are comfortable, and that's a position I can hold for an indefinite amount of time. And then the looking inward prevents them from almost cross-eyed, kind of looking at my forehead, prevents them from looking around and doing that twitching kind of movement that seems to disrupt the process or at least slow down the process for me. So I would recommend trying that. I'd say the next thing to think about after movement and your sleep position is distractions. And maybe that should be number one. Maybe that, I mean, because that's before you actually lay down, right? So all distractions need to be gone. You need to turn off your phone. Um, you need to, well, in my case, block out all sound. I actually put earplugs in my ears, and I sleep with earplugs primarily because it'll block out everything in the outside world, and it also has the added benefit of letting me hear more internal noise, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but that's helpful for that whole progression, being able to hear that internal noise. And then me, I'm married, so my wife doesn't go to bed the same time I do, and I'll wear a sleep mask over my eyes to block out light in case she comes in and needs to turn on the light or whatever. So getting rid of all distractions is very important. If you've done this a few times, you can confirm how frustrating it is to really start to feel like you're making progress, and then have somebody cough in another room or a dog bark outside, and it ruins the process, and then you start over again, and then you got another 45 minutes ahead of you where you're laying there in bed trying to put your body to sleep. So probably step number one, move that to the top, get rid of all distractions. Something kind of funny. I'll tell you a funny story. So one more distraction that is actually probably more distracting than any of the others that I've dealt with is sleeping in the same bed with somebody. And this was especially so at the beginning when I was starting this process. Like I said, I'm laying there for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever, and I'm putting my body to sleep, and I really start feeling like I'm making progress, and I start to feel that heavy lead blanket start to roll up my legs, and it never failed. Right when I started to feel like I'm making progress, my wife would roll over in bed, and she's asleep. It's unintentional, and I know it's unintentional, but I couldn't help get upset and frustrated and annoyed. And in the morning, I'm cranky because not only deprive myself of sleep while I'm doing this at night, but I also didn't make any progress. And then my crankiness is, channeled towards her because she's the one that rolled over unintentionally. And so I feel bad because, here she is. She's sleeping like she's supposed to be sleeping, like we have been sleeping for forever, right? And here I am. I'm supposed to be sleeping too, but instead I'm trying to do this thing, and her sleeping is disrupting my progress. So I found a solution to that. We got rid of our one big bed, and we got two twin beds, and we put them about a half an inch apart. And they're different box springs, different legs, and it has been the most incredible, most beneficial thing to this entire process. She can get up, she can roll over, she can go to the bathroom, come back to bed, and I don't feel a thing. My bed doesn't move at all. So that's one more distraction that is probably even worse than any of the others, is somebody in bed with you rolling around. So if you're going to practice this and you don't have the benefit of sleeping alone, I'd recommend maybe trying moving to a couch while you practice, or set up some mat on the floor or something. Just get in a place where somebody next to you is not going to disrupt the process. All right, so that is distractions. I think the next thing to probably talk about is breathing. Now, when you think of breathing and you think of this relaxation process and you think of meditation, probably the first thing that comes to your mind is very deep breathing. That's what everybody always says. Stephen LaBerge calls it pot-belly breathing. It's something called pranayama breathing, where you take really deep breaths, you hold it when you breathe in, you take really long drawn out exhales, and then you hold it when the air's gone. And the goal is to really slow down the breathing and really expand your lungs fully. Um, and this is great for meditation. This is great for relaxation in general. But I don't do this when I'm putting my body to sleep. Maybe I'll start with this to try to relax my body. But once I get to the point where I feel like I'm going to start making progress, I actually make my breath um, shorter and more shallow. Now, you want it to be comfortable. You don't want to feel like you're depriving yourself of oxygen. You don't want to feel like you're short of breath and that this is, because that could be just as much of a challenge. But keeping my breath short and keeping my breath more shallow actually helps in the scenario I was talking about in the vibrational video, where the sleep comes up your legs, it makes its way to your chest, and when it hits your chest starts to feel this really heavy feeling. And that actually, if you've experienced that, that can make it feel like you're really struggling to breathe because you've got this extra weight feeling on your chest. So if you are doing these really deep breathing exercises and expanding your chest fully, all of a sudden that becomes difficult because you feel all this extra weight. And that difficulty can cause panic, it can cause discomfort, it can just cause you to change your breathing pattern, and that'll ruin this body falling asleep progress. So what I found is that breathing shorter and more shallow, but again, still keep it comfortable, um, keeps you from making your chest expand as much while you're breathing. Your lungs aren't expanding to their full potential. And when that sleep hits my chest and that weight piles on, um, it's a lot easier to continue with that same pattern of breathing comfortably as the process continues. So I would recommend trying that, especially if you have experienced this heavy sensation on your chest. That's been very helpful for me. I would say the next thing to think about is probably relaxation. Um, so the reason I put relaxation down so far in the list and not up at the top is because lying in bed to fall asleep, relaxation is easy. For me personally, and I would say it's probably easy for most people, right? Because we fall asleep every night, and so you relax, and it's not a hard thing to fall asleep. When relaxation becomes difficult is when you start feeling these sensations that you're not accustomed to. So the minute that lead blanket feeling starts working its way up your body, the initial reaction that I used to have to that was to tense my muscles, clench my jaw or hold my breath or clench the muscle or tense the muscles in my arms or my legs. And again, that's you're doing something to let the body know that your mind is still awake and that your mind is noticing what's going on. And you've got to pretend you don't notice any of this. So relaxation becomes critical as this process continues and as your body starts to fall asleep. So what I did actually over a long period of time, because this did take a little while to work through, because it's not easy to not react to these sensations, is as these sensations would begin, I would just consciously work my way from head to toe, from toe to head, back and forth, just evaluating every different muscle group in my body and say, am I tensing it? Could I possibly relax more? Can I sink into the bed more? Do I have any tension in any areas? And I would consciously just relax over and over again. And eventually it becomes habit to just let the sensations become more familiar, and it just becomes habit to let those sensations happen without tensing up and being able to relax through the whole thing. But relaxation is definitely key when you get to that stage and you start to feel those sensations. All right, so the next thing, the most annoying part of the process, at least for me, God, this is still annoys me to this day, the itches. It's if you've experienced these, they are not like any other itches that you have during the day. So this is, again, one more attempt of your body to say, hey, is the brain asleep? And so your body will generate these itches. And for me, it's always on my face. And it feels like somebody has just laid like a cobweb or a spider web across my face. And I feel just multiple points of itches, just these little tickly itching sensations, specifically around my nose and my mouth, right around here. And oh, they're awful, and they still bother me to this day. And I have lost many battles with these itches. I have given in and scratched and ruined the process more than once. The key with these itches is to just ignore them. You can't focus on them and just keep thinking about them because they tend to never go away. You have to try to keep your mind occupied with something else. Um, just ignore these itches until they fade away, and they will, because your body is just it's saying, hey brain, are you asleep yet? And if you don't react to these itching sensations and you can just ignore them, they'll just fade away, 10 or 15 seconds, and they'll be gone. Something really interesting about these itches, and one more thing that makes me convinced that it's just my body that's generating these, is that in the times where I have finally just given in and scratched, almost the moment that I move my arm up to my face, before I even touch my face, the itch is gone. So it's like my brain is saying, aha, gotcha, you're not asleep. And the itch goes away before I even touch it. And so I'm convinced that it's my body trying to just double check to make sure that it's okay for it to fall asleep. So if you experience that, which I know lots of other people have, that's a common sensation that you read about. Just ignore the itches, think about something else, don't focus on them, don't touch them, and they'll go away on their own. But it's not easy by any means at all. The next step is to keep your mind awake. Excuse me. Now this is probably one of the biggest challenges. Um, I'd say probably one of the biggest two challenges. So the first part of keeping your mind awake is to keep it busy with something, but you don't want that something to be too interesting. You don't want to spend lots of time thinking about an upcoming vacation and how you're so excited for. You don't want to think about all the problems at work that day or all the things you need to do tomorrow. If you've ever sat there and just contemplated those things over and over again at night, like all the things that went wrong at work that day, um, if you're like me, you'll find that that quickly leads to not being able to sleep at all. It leads to insomnia. It leads to tossing and turning, and that's not the state you want to be in. What you want to do is you want to keep your mind busy with some not too exciting, monotonous type task that's at least enough to keep it busy. And a lot of people use repetitive type words or mantras. Um, Personally, I will count down from 300 to 1. And the reason I count down is because it takes a little bit more um, cognitive effort than counting forwards, and it's easier for me to keep my brain more engaged. So I'll count 300, 299, 298, and I just count backwards, and just something to keep my mind busy. Other people I've read say mind asleep, body awake, mind asleep, body awake, to try to build that intention as well. And they just repeat that over and over again. And if you find yourself starting to lose consciousness, the goal is to pull yourself back into the waking state enough so you can continue this process. And if you're counting, doesn't matter what number you left off on, just pick a number and continue counting down. The goal is just to keep your mind busy, but with something that isn't too exciting, that's not going to really, just keep it awake. Um, so that is a difficult thing to do, much harder to do than it is to say. Um, and especially the second thing that's difficult, it especially becomes difficult when you get to the point where your mind is just really hovering on that awake asleep threshold, which is where you want it. You don't want to let it fall asleep, but you also don't want to keep it 100% awake. You want to get to past that hypnagogic imagery where you're seeing little snippets of dreams and little snippets of conversation. usually nonsensical stuff, but you want to get past that to the point where your mind is just hovering right above sleep. And that's a hard place to hover. If you dip into sleep, you need to be able to pull your mind back out again. And sometimes what I found is it's actually beneficial to let your mind dip into sleep, but you have to be able to pull it out again. And there's times where I can't get my body to fall asleep because my mind is too active or because my body, isn't tired enough or something. And so dipping into sleep multiple times, I'll dip in 3 or 4 times and dip back out. And usually on the third or fourth time, right when I come back out, I'll feel that lead blanket feeling start rolling up my legs. So it's an important thing to learn how to do, but that is probably the second most hard, most difficult piece of this. So that brings me to my more experimental type measures and what I did to try to be able to consciously pull myself back out again once I dip into sleep. So I started with a video that Robert Bruce made where he talks about laying in bed, lay on your back, and have your arm propped up on the bed like this, fingers pointed toward the ceiling. And then as you fall asleep, um, your arm will start to sink down. And your arm falling down should wake you back up again. And so you do that over and over again. Just keep putting your arm back up. Every time you fall asleep, do it again. And you just do that over and over again as you try to train your mind to get used to that sensation and that reflex of pulling itself back out as soon as it goes under. Now, the problem with this that I found is that I could do this for 45 minutes or an hour and still have no success because my muscles start to get strained and tired and start burning just from holding my arm up like this. And it got to the point where it was so uncomfortable that I couldn't relax even enough to get close to sleep. So it may work for some people. Go ahead and give it a try. I actually got another idea from Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison, he found that he had a lot of creativity, untapped creativity, and inspiration right in the hypnagogic state, right on that awake asleep threshold. And so what he would do is he would sit in a straight back chair to keep himself from falling asleep too quickly. Again, so it's similar to the idea of laying in a non-standard, non-usual position while you're doing this process to keep yourself, slow down the process, keep yourself from falling asleep too quickly. He'd sit in a straight back chair and he would hold steel ball bearings in his hands over the arms of the chair. He'd have his arms rested. And then he'd have metal tins, metal plates or pans down on the floor underneath these ball bearings. So now he would let himself fall asleep, and as he fell asleep, his hands would relax, and they would drop the ball bearings, they'd hit the metal pans, and he would wake up. And he would do that over and over again to hover on this in this hypnagogic state where he could find additional creativity and inspiration that he didn't find during the waking state. And I thought, why not try that? Why not employ that same type of technique while I'm in bed? So I went out in my garage and I found this little steel weight with I could loop a string through. Not very heavy, but a little steel weight, and I tied it to my finger, and I lay in bed on my back with my hand kind of leaning over the side of the bed like this. Now, when I fall asleep, my hand would relax, and that weight would roll out of my hand and fall and yank on my finger because the string is tied to my finger. And I also didn't have to pick it up off the floor like Thomas Edison did. I would just pull the string back up, put it back in my hand, and it allowed me to stay more in that relaxed state. But I would do that time after time after time, night after night, just trying to train my brain to get used to that reflex of pulling itself back out as it was going under. And then I also the next thing I tried after the weight was I actually tried doing this during the day. I would at least 3 or 4 times a week during my lunch break at work, I would actually lay down and I would do this over and over again. I would do it during the day because during the day I'm not naturally tired, and so it slows down the process even more. And I'd prop my head up like usual, pretending I'm going to try to put my body to sleep and project, and I would let my mind fall asleep, and I would just try to wake up over and over again. And I built up this reflex, and this is something, like I said, I can't pinpoint exactly which one of these things worked and which ones didn't. But eventually I was able to build up this reflex so where now I can lay down at night and I can do this without any sort of tools or props or anything else like that. I could just lay down and with just intention, I can pull myself back out of sleep. So that helps, again, when your body can't relax enough or your mind won't slow down enough, and you just need to dip in and out a few times to get that sleep process started. All right, so that's making your body fall asleep in the first place. So after you make it through all of those steps, you reach the stage that I got to in the vibrational video, where that heavy lead blanket feeling starts at the bottom of your feet. It starts working its way up your legs. Um, you'll start to feel numb, and eventually, as far as your body goes, the further that sleep blanket makes it up your body, you'll start to lose sense and lose feeling completely of your legs. It's like they're gone, and you're not aware of them anymore. Same thing with your arms. As it makes it past your arms, the further up your body it makes it, the less aware you become of having arms, or even what position your arms are laying in, and things like that. So it hits your chest. Quite often you have a very rapid heartbeat, again, if you're like me, at the beginning. And nowadays it's much easier for me to ignore that than it used to be. But a long time ago, as I mentioned, that rapid heart beating, that really hard pounding in my chest would be enough to cause panic and really disrupt the cycle. So I don't know what to tell you about that other than just do it over and over again until you become accustomed to that rapid heartbeat. Because I did it the other day, and I actually consciously thought about it, and I thought, oh, that heartbeat is still there. That's still happening. But it's just something I've become accustomed to, and it's not something that disrupts the process anymore. So you're breathing kind of shallow, kind of shorter, more shallow breaths. You feel a weight on your chest as the sleep passes your chest. Now, something interesting for me is when the sleep reaches my head. Now, I've never heard any other accounts of this, and again, I'd be interested in hearing if anybody else experiences this. But when that wave of sleep hits my head, right when it gets about to where my brain would be, um, I feel like this. All right, so if you were to stand up and turn in circles really, really fast with your eyes closed, and then sit down, that residual spinning sensation, I feel something like that. It's more of a backwards movement sensation, like a vertigo spinning backwards sensation as that sleep hits my head and as it makes its way through my brain to the top of my head. And it feels like for 3 to 5 seconds, like I'm just shooting backwards and up. Um, it's a strange sensation. And I've thought at times, maybe I could really put that to use. Maybe I could just project straight from there. If I could just latch onto that feeling, continue that upward momentum, maybe I could cut out the rest of the process and just project. But I have been unable to find anything useful to do with that sensation other than to use it as sort of a sign in the road that says, hey, you're making progress, and look, you're almost there. So I get that strange sensation in my head. And at that point, my body's asleep. So at this point, your body is completely, I mean, you can't feel it at all. If you can feel it, you're just vaguely, vaguely aware of even having a body. And at this point, you're in what people call the trance state or the void, where you're kind of just floating around in blackness. At this point, you still have other sensory stimulation. Like you can still hear things through your ears, whether you're wearing earplugs or not. But that changes very shortly after that. Once your body is completely fallen asleep physically, it seems to be the next step is your body says, all right, body's asleep, time to shut down the senses. And so for me, that's my eyes and ears primarily, since touch is already gone. And even through my earplugs, I can hear, it's like a light switch, just click. I can hear muffled sound from outside, like I said, TV, people in the house, whatever, all of a sudden to nothing but internal noise. And all I can hear is internal static, internal ringing kind of in my head, and everything else is just gone. And it's a change just like that. Just it's an abrupt change where it just clicks off, and now you're inside your head rather than outside. And then it doesn't always go in the same order, but then it's my eyes. So that seems like a strange thing to say because you've got, so in my case, I've got a mask on, so I've got blackness on top of blackness because my eyelids are closed as well. But closing your eyes, even in pitch black, you still see little patterns and light. Um, Frank Keppel calls this stray energy, which is an interesting thought, neural discharge or something like that. Um, so you still see these colors and these lights behind your closed eyelids. So when your eyes shut off, it's again just as an abrupt sensation as it was with my ears, and everything just goes click and it's black, just pitch black, no more colors, no more lights, no more stray energy or whatever you think of it as, and everything is pitch black, and my senses are off. And now you really have just this feeling of just floating in this void, just being consciousness without any physical senses, just in blackness, just with nothing around you. And actually, I got to the point where I really enjoy this. I actually really like that void state, enough so that I put myself in this state every night before bed. Even if I don't plan on projecting, just for extra practice, make sure I don't forget these skills that it took me so long to learn. I'll lay down and I'll put my body to sleep and I get to this state and I spend a good amount of time in it until I think I really probably should go to bed so I'm not, or go to sleep so I'm not tired for work in the morning. And then I'll roll over and I'll pull myself out of it, roll over and go to sleep. But I really enjoy this empty void state. But what this puts you in is this empty void state is the ideal place to start doing like techniques to try to further the progress and to initiate the vibrational state and everything that comes after it to project. So I think I'm at 30 minutes. I think that this is probably a good place to stop it for now. So let's say this is the focus of this one is to talk about everything required to put your body to sleep. I'm going to continue on with my next video, and I'll talk more about the techniques actually required to induce the vibrational state and the other sensations and things like that that you achieve with the techniques once you're in this void type scenario, this void type floating around in space kind of state. So thank you for watching. I know this was a long one, but hopefully it was helpful for people, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.